Good afternoon, everyone. This is our first event of this financial year, and I'm so glad I've got Joyce here to talk to us on digital projects. Digital projects, I think, are very popular, and I think they've gained pace recently. But also, as a project itself, there's a lot of good, there's the bad, and I guess there's the ugly as well. So what is the good in the project? Because I guess we all want a good project to start off, and then obviously finish, and then go to business as usual as well. So Joyce Harman from Hart Square will talk to us about the good and what not to do, I guess, as well, to avoid those pitfalls. Just a little bit about Joyce. She's a consultant with Hart Square. She works very closely with a lot of charities, the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, Epilepsy Action, Friends of the Earth, and the Home Builders Federation, and many other non-profits as well. She's having over 20 years of experience across the commercial and non-profit sector, and has a background in business planning, customer relationship management, and event management, and so on. So I guess I'm going to hand it over to you, Joyce. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Atlab, and thanks again for inviting me. Delighted to be joining you all this afternoon. I know it is the end of the day, so try and not make this death by PowerPoint and bore you all. So I do have some slides that I'm going to go through, but please do put in any questions, and we can either cover them off throughout, or we can cover those off at the end. So bear with me while I share my screen. Get the technology work is always a good start when talking about technology projects. So yeah, as Atlab said, so I'm a consultant at Hart Square, and really my role is around helping clients understand what it is they need to do, how they should embark on a project, be it whatever type of project, be it CRM or website or community platforms or any different types of sort of digital projects, and how is the best approach. And I suppose one of the points as well that I only work with clients in the not-for-profit sector and do an awful lot of work with charities and membership bodies. And one of the things around that is, and actually we were just sort of talking before we started, saying around the nuances of working within that sector is every single decision that is made about a project spend has an awful lot, an extra layer of rigor, because you are spending money that has been either fundraised, or it's been donated in, or has come from membership fees and things like that. So it's really, really important in any projects that you're doing to be able to show that value, to be able to show that benefit at the end of the project. So I was going to cover off just sort of 5 sort of key areas thinking about technology projects, very much looking around technology and digital projects. So the different stages of the projects and sort of some key considerations, and really based on sort of lessons learned from doing this over the years, as I said, over 20 years experience, and not trying to show my age, as some other years experience before that as well. Looking at resourcing is always one of those things that is underestimated completely, and it is quite startling how people don't appreciate the resourcing that is needed. And actually one of the conversations we were having just before is around where historically on maybe sort of different types of project, it would be the IT team responsible for managing and running the projects, but actually when doing these kind of projects, the IT team of course have a part, but it's significantly less because of the nature of the projects. So I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail. Then when choosing your technology partner, some considerations around that. A big part of that is about relationship building. The actual tech part is quite a small element of it, don't get me wrong, it is important, but there is an awful lot more to consider when looking on these projects. Then just highlighting sort of some of the key documents that we find are really useful that you should have as that part of the governance on your project, to make sure that your project is running on time, really focusing on those benefits, making sure that any change is managed properly, and all of that. And then finally, I'm just going to touch on data migration. Now, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to this. I could talk about data all day long, but I'm not going to bore you. But it's a fundamental on all of these projects. And one of the things we always say is you can start looking at your data early enough. You don't have to wait till you finish partner selection and start implementation. If you're right at the start, but when you're thinking about doing a project, to start thinking about your data. So there's sort of some the 5 key points that I'm going to cover off today. So I wanted to just quickly put up this. So at HeartSquare, we do a research study every couple of years, and we're actually working on a new version of this for next year. But this research study, it's called Why to Do CRM and Digital Technology Projects Succeed or Fail. Obviously, for this time around, we're going to come up with a much snappier title. But really, it's just kind of to highlight some of the challenges and some of the reasons where projects have gone wrong. And this also is the basis of some of the fundamental ways we think about projects and how you should do projects, looking at the lessons learned from the sector. So the highest one for sort of reasons for project failure was around processes. So that is where there's either been a lack of, project resourcing and experience, but really importantly, a poor definition of the business requirements. Now, I'm going to come on to later to talk about the difference between technical requirements and business requirements, because there's quite a nuance around that, but it actually makes a fundamental difference on a project. But it is things like having poor process design and recreating inefficient processes in a new system. So processes was a big part of, we did this study of as to why the projects hit problems along the way. Then after that was very much looking at strategy. So strategy is really, really key. At the end of the day, you need to be very clear, why are you doing this project? Why are you embarking on this digital project, this CRM project, whatever it is? That there is a clear set of objectives and goals, and very much focusing on what we sort of call the end stage after go live is benefits realization. So being really clear right from the start when you're looking at sort of what is your business case for doing the projects, what are the benefits that we're aiming, why are we going through all of this pain and spending all of this money and spending all of this time? If that's not clearly defined properly at the start, how do you know you have succeeded? Because very often people will think we've go live, that's the success. It's not. It has to be more than just go live. Go live is not just the ultimate goal. So strategy was sort of the next one. The people side of thing was, people are a huge part of all projects. And when we are doing any projects, and it's very much looking about, the change management approach, bringing the people along with you. If you do a project, if people feel that you've done a project at them rather than with them, they're not going to be bought into it. Your user adoption and uptake of any new system is going to be poor, it's going to be low, and there's just lack of buy-in. Also on the people side is where when you don't get messaging, clear messaging from senior management about why we're doing this project, that we need your time and commitment to it, it is going to impact on your day jobs. If there isn't that sort of senior level buy-in resonating down to the rest of the organization, it causes problems as well. And then one of the things that also comes up a lot, and we've been finding an awful lot on some of the projects we've been working on recently, is around skills and skills gaps. A lot of when you get into the testing phase on projects, it can really identify some fundamental skills gaps within the organization. And this is where sometimes then people, it comes out through testing, but they don't really want to highlight it because they're worried it's going to have an impact on them, on their role going forward. But there's definitely, and we're doing a lot more work around kind of doing skills analysis and skills audit, but it is to benefit of those staff. It's not about finding that there's problems and then removing those people. It's about how you can then work with those people, how you can then train those people so that, it's better for you and it's better for them. But so people, really, really key one. So if the people aren't looked after properly, it's going to cause a big problem with the project. And then finally, technology. So this is the smallest part for the sort of the reason that, projects, have failed. And that's because, and being very conscious of the audience I'm talking to, it's very rare that the tech is the problem because, as we all know, technology can be made to do anything, but it can only be made to do what you need it to do if you've got the correct requirements, if it's very clear about what it is being built and how it's being built and why it's being built. So where on this research study where around technology, it was that there was either poor, functionality, missing functionality, or you've gone down the highly bespoke route, the highly customized route, because high customization, high bespoking leads to a lot more cost, a lot more time, and then more difficult management, post go live. So, you know, it's, as I say, it's not to say that sometimes the technology is the problem, because, you know, it can be. But if it is, turns out it is the technology, that's more come down to the wrong solution was chosen, the wrong tech was chosen. So really just wanted to cover that as a bit of a, I suppose, a scene setting for some of the other points that I'm going to cover. So really to go into the sort of the different stages of the project and key considerations. Now, this by absolutely no means is all of the different stages of a project. There's fundamentally lots of different stages, but this is sort of some of the key ones. And it's about going to look at a bit the difference between what is a requirements gathering process versus a discovery process, because even I was having a conversation with a client about this today. There is a fundamental point around it. So one of the fundamental stages, the sort of the first stage when embarking on any sort of technology project, is the requirements gathering. Now, one of the things to say here is that, and this conversation comes up an awful lot, and this is definitely where projects go wrong, your requirements gathering is not your technical specification. These are your business requirements. So this is about what is it you must do as an organization. You know, what are the challenges that you have currently? You know, what tech are you using currently? But also really, really importantly, come back to that point of the strategy. Why are you doing this project? You know, what is it you as an organization, your fundamental overarching strategy is, so that this, whatever this technology project you're doing is, fits into within that. So being very clear that it's business requirements, it's not a technical specification. We will come on to later about talking about when you're working with partners, but what the partners need in order for them to be able to quote against your requirements is a business requirement, not a technical spec. So really what you need to do is reaching out through the whole organization to find out, you know, what are their needs, where possible, you know, carry out a business process review as a sort of a baseline to kind of understand where you are. It's a really good way to uncover what's working and what's not working, because you don't want to basically bring, you know, bad, inefficient processes into any new system that you're rolling out. You know, bringing together all those requirements, you know, you're going to involve, you know, all the different teams in the organization, and that you want people to feel bought into this process, you know, that is that sort of the change management piece, the people piece, that people feel that they've been consulted. It is then a balance of, you know, the sort of the consultation versus people then thinking that they then can completely influence all decisions for the organization. You know, we have to be realistic about this. So it's really then when you're coming to the sorting and the requirements is looking about what is then the essentials and what are the nice to haves. Your requirements are going to be many and varied. Everybody's going to have a view. Not everybody's going to agree, and you're not going to be able to please everybody. But the main thing is that when you get to collating all of those requirements, that you have that fundamental core team, you know, the key people that are going to make the decisions on what, you know, the priorities are against those requirements. And again, keeping in mind the objectives of the organization, the objectives of the project, when you're refining down what those requirements are. Discovery. So you've now, you know, when you move into discovery, that's when you've chosen your technology partner and you're starting the implementation phase. Now, one of the really, really important points, and say I was actually having a conversation with a client this morning about this, is because they were saying, well, we've done our requirements gathering, but we've been saying, you know, they need to be more detailed, they're not detailed enough. And they'd said, well, what we're going to do is when we get into discovery, the partner will then outline all those requirements for us. And that's when projects absolutely go wrong. That's when kind of like alarm bells go off for me. It is not the technology partner's job to do requirements for you. You are responsible for putting together your requirements, because that is what they're going to put together their response on, their bid on, how much it's going to cost. So discovery is where the partner that you've chosen is going to be using your requirements document that you would have then changed in, you know, turned into an invitation to tender document. That is the baseline. I kind of call it the Bible for reference, that when they're going through discovery, they're going to be referring back to that, to the initial requirements, to say, yeah, because this is what we responded against. So the discovery is to expand of all of that. It's further workshops with the teams. It's pulling out much more detailed information. It's where they're going to then put together the technical specification. They're going to put together the budget. they're going to put together the project phases, the project plan. So it's really important that the requirements were right, so that when it goes into discovery, they're expanding on them. They're not writing requirements from start, because if they're having to write requirements from start in the discovery phase, that's when your budget is going to go out the window, because it'll be then conversations around, well, that wasn't in the spec that we quoted against, therefore it's going to be additional cost. And unfortunately, I won't name any clients. I've got many examples of where this has happened in the past, and you have to go in and say, okay, we need to take a step back and we need to start again. And nobody wants to get to the point where they're in discovery and they have to pause a project to agree what the specification is. So being very clear, understanding the difference between requirements and discovery, and that very much seeing discovery as this is going to be then your legal agreement between you and the partner. This is where it's going to be very detailed scope of what they're going to deliver to you, how much it's going to cost, and how long it's going to take to be delivered. So discovery is really, really, really important and a really key element to any project. Then one of the other key phases is around testing. So testing, again, a lot of conversations I have with clients is particularly around user acceptance testing, so UAT and UAT scripts. So very often, you talk about testing, and a lot of people, when you say you would think, I don't know what a test script is. I don't know how to write a test script. And there's then conversations about, we can get the technology partner to write the test scripts for us. And that is an absolute no-no, really, because absolutely, they could write the test scripts because they're writing a test script against the system they just built for you. But in essence, they're just marking their own homework. So it's really about saying, no, you need, to write the test scripts. They can help you with it. They can assist you on how to approach writing a test script. But you as a client, you must write them, because at the end of the day, you're the only person who can test the system to see if it's going to work for you. So UAT scripts is a big thing that always comes up around testing. Then it's very important to look at, defining the roles and the responsibilities to the team, explaining, because, some people, they will have never have done testing of a system before. They don't know what to do. It can seem quite daunting. So being very clear on what the roles and responsibilities are, how they're going to do testing, what the approach is, how they need to do it. Having a really good process for tracking of any bugs, of any issues, feeding them back to the partner, so then they can respond in time to tell you how long it's going to take to fix, when you can then retest, so that it's all very clearly mapped out, and everybody knows when fitting it into their day job, when they have to allocate time for testing. Integration testing is often something that really gets forgotten about. So for example, if you're implementing a new CRM, very often these days, it'll be integrated to the website or to, say, a member portal or something like that. So integration testing is key. Don't forget about it, because you need to be able to test all the different nuances, all the different elements of what the system is going to deliver before you can do that sign-off piece at the end. And then very much, really giving it a good test, really, testing all of the different nuances, testing the performance. Is it working the way that you would expect it to work? Or is it really clunky? Is it difficult? That's all the stuff that you really need to feed back to the partners, going through that process. Then moving on to training. So training, again, very important. I know I say all these things are really important, but they are. But the most important thing about training is planning. So being very clear on what is the schedule for training, make sure that people have proper time allocated in their diary for training. How are you going to do it? Is it going to be on site? Is it going to be remote? Is it going to be a hybrid approach? What equipment is needed? What do people need? Making sure training materials are delivered well in advance of the training sessions, and who is, from the organization point of view, who is leading as a support role throughout training. So everybody knows who to go to, where to, who to speak to, what they're expected to do when they're learning about how to use the system. Also really important to ask for evaluation and feedback on your training, because very often you might find that for certain groups in the organization, one way of training works, but it might not for others. So asking for feedback and evaluation so that you can constantly review that. So then when you're looking to training going forward, either for new starters or for rolling out of other systems, that you've kind of learned those lessons. It's really, really important. And then obviously look at the different, types of training. A lot of the technology partners these days very much go for the train the trainer approach, where you're choosing one or two people within the organization, and they're going to be sort of your main experts, your champions on the project, and they will be fully trained up, and then they will train the rest of the staff. It's also a good model for thinking after go live for how you are going to induct new people, all of that kind of stuff. So a train the trainers approach is one of the ones, but then obviously you can do the more traditional classroom or one-to-one training, virtual meetings, written manuals, demonstrations. Through COVID, I have to say that definitely online or videos has they were used before, but has been used an awful lot more. And it's a really good idea to have a sort of a shared learning hub, somewhere either, on your internet or wherever, on SharePoint or wherever you hold your information, that there's one place that all training materials are stored. And also the point that it's not just about either choose a written manual versus a virtual meeting. It's having lots of different ways available, because people will touch in and out to train at different ways, and people like to train in different ways. Then talking about partner management. So this is a really, really important part in the sense of my comment right at the start about it's very rarely that the technology is the problem. Where problems can go wrong on the technology side can be where the relationship with the technology partner, has problems, where you haven't sort of spend time to build up that relationship. You're not giving constructive feedback. So it's really, really important to manage that relationship, because at the end of the day, it's costing a lot of money to bring these partners in and to do this work. You want to get the best value for your money. So it's about managing a close relationship with the partners, being very clear on the roles and responsibilities. So on their side, who is their project manager, who is their project sponsor, who are the developers, who's doing what, so that equally you can then say and match up on this side, well, this is our project manager, this is our project sponsor. So everybody's very clear who's doing what, everybody knows who to report into, and what the sort of the governance track or the escalation points are. Really important, sort of we were talking about discovery, the importance of discovery and sign off, and that your partner really being very clear on what they're going to deliver to you for discovery and sign off. There have been situations in the past where it had been said, we are not going to provide you with a full one document with everything in. There was a challenge that came up on actually one or two clients, and it's very much saying, no, that's not going to work for us. We need one document with the full scope in it, so that we can actually, check it and make sure that we're happy. We don't want to be reviewing a spec against, 7 or 8 documents. That's not going to work. So being clear and going back and challenging things where need be. It's not about making the partner's life difficult. It's about making sure you're all on the same page. Have frequent communication. When you're going to have frequent communication, and your project manager is going to be spending a lot of time talking to the partner as well. But frequent communication is really, really important. And making sure you're completely aligned on the contract. What are the service level agreements? What are the KPIs? So that everybody's very, very clear. And if you're not sure when you're at that contracts phase, ask. There's nothing wrong with asking, saying, I don't understand that. I don't understand why that SLA is like that. Ask questions. It helps build that clear relationship. So then I was just going to move on to resourcing, another of my pet topics. And really looking at resourcing is one of the things is making sure that you've planned it. So right at the start of the project, even before you've chosen your partner, before you go through partner selection, identified who are going to be the people, the resources that you need to implement, whatever the project is, so that everybody, one, knows they're going to be involved in the project and what time it's going to take and what their role is. Making sure that the internal governance has been put in place. So how frequently are you going to run board meetings? What are the escalation routes? What are the key milestones? What are the decision points? Again, that is all organized right from the start. Very importantly, to have that clear kickoff meeting between you as the client and the partner, again, for that realignment, that start of the project, that everybody's on the same page. putting together, and I will go through the documents in a bit more detail, but putting together on the resourcing point of view, your PID, so your project initiation document and your project plan. These are living documents. They're really, really important, and it will help with the resources and the commitment throughout the project. Data migration, which I'm going to talk to a bit later, as I said before, it's never too early to start thinking about your data, and developing in your communications plan, because to the earlier point, you shouldn't be doing a project at people, you should be doing a project with them. So communicating with staff throughout why you're doing this, what their involvement is, and most importantly, what the benefits are going to be for them. So looking at the project team then, talking about resources, the project team and the resources that you need. So it kind of breaks up into sort of three sort of main areas. So you've got, the leadership side, and this is very much, the project board, the project sponsor, and the role of the sort of on the leadership side is about making sure that the resources are available. They've given the organizational authority for the project to happen, and they're going to champion the project, and they're going to support the project team. So it is kind of, as implied, the leadership role. On the management side of it, it's really about looking about having a change manager, somebody responsible for change, a product owner, really important that you have a product owner and somebody who, post go live as well, is going to own this new system, who's going to manage it, and your project manager. So they're really, this layer is very much about, it's monitoring progress, it's reporting, it's looking at stakeholder engagement for the whole project, partner management, and really much driving the project forward. And then looking at moving on to your project champions, the delivery side, your project champions, your subject matter experts. They're the key people in your teams. They know their areas of the business really, really well. They're key. They're going to be key when it comes to testing and things like that as well. So they're really there to engage with the project, to ensure that each of the bits, when you get into testing, that they're fit for purpose. They will find the issues, and to be honest, you want them to find the issues, because that's what testing is all about. They're going to be the people doing the testing and signing off, and also they're the people that can help with the conversations around any changes that you need to make to your business processes. And because as you go through this journey, you will find that there will be some changes you want to make to your business processes. So this slide is one that kind of generally terrifies everybody when I put it up, but it is based on my own personal experience, but the experience of working with Hearth Square, and these are the roles that are needed on a big digital project, a big change project. Don't worry, I do have a slide in a second where there's a kind of a refined version for smaller organizations, but you do need a project sponsor. And generally speaking, that's going to take up about a half a day a week. Their overall responsibility for the project. They're the one who is reporting up to the board about what's happening with the project. Your project manager is very much there, 3 to 4 days a week. Can be, depending on the project, could be 2 to 3 days a week. They are managing and they are delivering the project. Then the business lead, again, it's a couple of days a week, and it can often be a shared role between a few different people, but they're up there to really much give insights to the project. You need a business lead who knows the organization really, really well. Then on the data or the tech lead, again, this is, it is a couple of days a week. It will vary depending on the stages of the project, but particularly when you're getting ready to upload data in before testing, all of that kind of thing, the data person is going to be really, really busy. Also, they're going to be responsible for putting together and collating all of your data. Now, for some of the clients I work with, some don't have CRMs, or they have CRMs, but it's not being used very well. And data is residing in lots of different spreadsheets, data is residing in lots of different systems. Somebody has to be responsible for pulling all of this data together to get it ready, to map it so it can go into whatever the new system is. So it's a really chunky piece of work. And then say the subject matter experts, they're your guys on the ground, they're going to be doing the testings. The amount of time is going to vary depending on the stage of the project. So I suppose that the main point about this slide is the amount of time is absolutely significant, and it really can't be underestimated. I don't know how I've somehow magically managed to draw 2 blue lines by not touching anything, but I have, so apologies. I'm not going to try and get rid of them because God knows what I'll do. So then just really wanted to, for a lot of the organizations I work with organizations from 6 staff up to hundreds of staff. So very often when I put up that previous slide, for some of the clients that I work with that are much, much smaller, and they say, we've only got 6 staff, we can't, we can't deliver that many roles. So this is where, some work can be done to sort of merge some of the roles, but fundamentally you have to have your project sponsor. You have to have a project manager. Now, your project manager could be your business lead and your data and tech lead. It's a lot for one person. It really, really is a lot for one person. It can be done. It's not preferred. It's not recommended. But being realistic about the size of some organizations where, if they've only got 6 staff, well, what can you do? But, so looking at that, and then you have to have your subject matter experts, because they're the guys who are going to test everything. So just really saying where things can be rationalized down a bit, but the roles absolutely must be covered. It's fundamental to the success of the projects. Then looking at the importance of a dedicated project manager or project lead, depending on the way that you're going to resource the project. So the really important thing about a project manager is very much depending on what sector you're working in, making sure that your project manager, if you're bringing in a project manager externally, or you're bringing in somebody from within the organization, is that they have that sector experience, because it's amazing the differences. As say, I work just in the not-for-profit sector, so there is a big difference between, for example, if there was a CRM system that was built on Microsoft Dynamics, the vanilla Microsoft system will be built, to match the requirements of, say, whatever, a membership body. But how that is built for somebody in, say, the financial services sector or in the education sector will be completely different. So there is nuances around having sector experience and sector knowledge, so that you understand those nuances. So having a project manager that understands the sector that you're working in is really important. They have to be a highly organized person. That's the whole point of a project manager. Have to be a highly organized person and have a firm handle on how to get the best of the organization, but also that they have a clear understanding of what is it you're ultimately, why are you doing this? What is the ultimate goal? What is it you're trying to get to? Really, really important. And that they can also manage the partner, but also, to be quite honest, manage you as a client. The project manager is there, as I kind of politely try to say, to give everybody a bit of a kick when needed, to keep things on track, to ask, the questions, where are we with this? If there's any things going on around, there's a change of scope on the project or anything like that, that everybody's clear why the scope change has happened. Are we agreeing to the scope change? That it is documented, we're accepting the time, the additional time it's going to take, we're accepting the additional cost. So everybody's very clear and there's no arguments at the end of the day. The other reason about having a dedicated project manager is again, conflicting priorities. When you have a project manager who is somebody who is working for the organization and they're trying to fit this onto the day job, they're going to have conflicting priorities. The project has to be the focus. That's not taken away from people's day jobs, but to keep the project on time and on budget, you have to keep the focus. So that's why it's really good to have somebody that is absolutely dedicated. And yeah, as I said, they've got proven track record, they know what they're doing, so that you're not having to teach them project management. So when looking at choosing a technology partner, just a couple of points really on this one. Culture and fit are really, really important. So for a lot of for all of the projects that we do, to be honest, it's the tech is a small element of it. And I mean, that might sound ridiculous, because you'll have done all your requirements gathering, you will have done your partner long list, you will have identified technologies and partners that can match your requirements, can match your budget, can match your timelines. So you've kind of got that bit done. So it's about understanding, are they the kind of organization you're going to want to work with? How is the cultural fit? You're going to be working with them for a very long time. It's very important, that relationship, that chemistry, how's that going to work? When you're going through that partner selection piece, to make sure that you fully brief them on what it is, sending them your invitation to tender document, but you've given them the full background, the full history of what it is you're trying to do and why, so that they've got enough time to prepare. There's nothing worse than, as a partner, as a supplier, being asked to respond to, a tender or to a bid, and then asked to turn it around within a week. That, if you want people to do it, give them, a good job, give them enough time to do it. Sending them an agenda right in advance of any meetings that you're going to have with them. Talk them through what is your evaluation criteria, what is your focus, those kind of things, being very clear. So everybody's got a really fair chance about it. Data migration, again, asking early on, who's responsible for what when it comes to data migration. I do have a slide on this, but this is where there can be fundamentally disagreements. So asking early on about who's responsible for that. And then looking to add in the business leads as well as the senior stakeholders into your demo. So as this, you'll be deciding when you're going through partner selection, these are the key team who are going to choose the preferred partner. So you wouldn't want all staff on that list, but actually bring in some key people of staff, let them see the demo, because it helps let them get engaged so that they come in for certain elements throughout that process. And then when you're getting to then selecting the partner, give them plenty of time to respond. Very, very important. Make sure that you are very clear on what your selection criteria is in advance. When we run selection processes, we don't actually use a scoring matrix. There's different approaches to it, but it's what we do is very much having agreed selection criteria. So that can be, things like budget, it can be things like timeline, but it is looking at, certain requirements and how do they meet them, future proofing, all of the kind of things. So being very clear on what your selection criteria is, then put together, once you get your responses in, a comparison matrix of all the responses. The responses are going to come in, they're all going to be done in a different format, the pricing is all going to be very different. So you need to pull them all apart, put them into a comparison matrix so you can actually check against that criteria that you put together. Read the fine print on costings and service level agreements, and don't be afraid to ask for clarification. This is your opportunity. If you don't ask now, it might not get asked later. So ask any questions. Partners would prefer you to inundate them with questions, because then if you choose them, there's no confusion, no arguments later. And then be clear on anything that it might have been taken out of scope or might have been moved on to a different phase. And that might be because they might say, due to the budget that you have, this is what we could deliver now as an MVP, a minimum viable product. We could deliver these other services, but we've taken them out of scope for this for different reasons. So again, being very clear on what is in scope, has anything been taken out of scope, how have they moved anything, and why. Then going to go through this really quickly, looking at sort of key documents to have on your project. So your project initiation document, or your PID. So the purpose of this is to define your project. So it's got a very clear set of objectives, any assumptions that have been made on the project, what your governance structure is going to be, what are the different roles, who's responsible for those roles, what are the benefits and the outcomes that you're expecting for this project, and what is the agreed budget. Your project plan, all project managers, I love a project plan. So this is, links to the resources to time. And it will also, have the partner side, the client side, commitments and dependencies. If there is, for example, the client I'm working with at the moment, crisis, they run crisis at Christmas. So obviously December is a no-go area for them, and actually quite a bit before then. So is there any big things that you do as an organization that are no-go areas, so that everybody's aware of that in the project plan? One point on the project plan also is that very often people think the partner is going to do the project plan, therefore we don't need to do one. That's not true. You will both have one. You'll make sure that they link up, but you both must have your project plans, because the partner's project plan they're focusing purely on the delivery. There's other elements they're not going to consider, so you both must have a project plan. Then the risk register, this is very, as it says, so it's to track risks and actions and to make any decisions, and it includes, any mitigations that you're going to make. Then other documents that are useful to have is your communications plan. How are you communicating to the staff, to the key stakeholders, what it is you're doing, why you're trying to do it. Project board standing papers, it's very good to have in your agreed project boards, how often they're going to be, what are the things that you're going to put in. The purpose is really to communicate the status of the project to the key stakeholders. and then the status reports. So that's really about reporting and recording on the health of the project. You know, is there any risks that have come up? Where have we got to on the project? What is the latest progress? Have there been any change controls? Things like that. And then moving on to the last bit around data migration. So this is, I do call it, one of the biggest challenges. So as I sort of said earlier, very often there is disagreement on who is responsible for data migration. So I've really just sort of broken this down into 7 different stages. So right at the start, sort of phases 1, 2, and 3, that is the client side's responsibility. So that is where you are identifying where all your data sources are, you're planning and resourcing who's going to be responsible for this, how is it going to happen. You need to do the analysis of your data, you know, how much data do you need to bring into the new system, how much, you know, is old data that you don't need, you know, what are considerations around GDPR and all of those different types of things, because there's no point in taking, and also what state is your data in? Is your data very clean? Do you need to do a bit of a data audit, a data clean? Because you don't want to bring bad data into a new system. People will often say, oh, but once we move into the new system and then we'll do it afterwards. The reality is it doesn't happen. So take the time and those sort of first 3 stages to do that analysis, to do the data cleaning, and then extract all of that information. So then it can then be handed over to the partner, which is very much sort of stages 4 and 5 about sort of transforming that data into the mapping part, to map it into how it needs to go into the new system, for then the partner to load it into the new system. And this will, you know, depending on the project, there will generally be 1 or 2, well, 2, possibly 3 data loads, because you can't test until you put in some of your data. You need to test against your own data. So, the partner will load up the data into the test environment, so you can test against it, and then it's back to you, the client, for that that testing phase, testing against real data, and then to sign off to say, yeah, that, you know, the system is working and it's working with our data, you know, but again, reporting back or anything like that. And then once you've done that, then basically you launch. Now, sort of the phases sort of between 3 and 6, this can happen a couple of times depending on how many data loads that you're going to do. You know, that might happen a couple of times, but then once you've done that a couple of times and then you're happy with it, then you will launch the data, you will launch the system. Sorry, let me just click on this. Then, sorry. Okay, so really then just to wrap up. So there's a lot of fundamental sort of principles really when looking on a project. It's, you know, key stages, planning is really, really, really important. Getting people involved right from the start is the fundamental part. Thinking of the technology project as being, it's not an IT project. Very often that's when we talk to people and they say, it's an IT project, or they'll say, it's a fundraising department's project. Project should not be seen as owned by just one department. It is a project that is for the organization, and that you're looking about that, you're looking at the strategy, you're looking at the bigger picture. And then I suppose if I just, you know, 2 things to kind of finish up with really is having a very clear plan about what it is you're trying to do, being very, very clear on what your requirements are. Don't forget about data, start thinking about it as soon as possible, and sometimes do a bit of a data amnesty. So very often we find out that people have a lot of hidden Excel spreadsheets and nobody really wants to tell you that they have them. Kind of create a bit of what we call a safe space to say, you know what, now's the time to declare where all your other spreadsheets are, where else are you holding data, so that when you do that data piece, you actually have the full picture of what your data is. And then resources. Don't underestimate the resources. It is significant. It takes an awful lot of time. It sometimes terrifies boards of trustees when you tell them about how many people you're going to need on this project and you might need to consider backfill. But it's really, really important, and it's all part of the sort of the fundamentals of trying to deliver a successful project. And that was all from me. Any questions?
Thank you for that, Joyce. very interesting indeed. On that. There is a couple of questions. First one is, can you use a hybrid methodology for IT software projects? I think it's probably a project management question.
So in a sense of sort of a hybrid, internally managing, or more as in the resourcing side, or a sort of a hybrid approach? Just, I don't know if you have any more clarification on that.
Yes, I know. I'm not sure. Jim, I think if you can just put some in the chat and then you try to get something from. Joyce, you mentioned about strategy and the buying, things like that. When it comes to the digital projects, change is change, and change is difficult for most.
Yeah.
How can we overcome this? Either using the strategy and get the buy-in from the organization.
So change is difficult across the board. It's definitely not to be underestimated. I think that the big thing when doing the strategy or doing the business case or whatever it is, that one of the key points that you put in that strategy is people. Call out people as a line item on that strategy, so that you're right fundamentally from the start. You're not just thinking about what is the technology we're trying to get. You're thinking about how is this going to benefit my staff, or how it's going to benefit my members, or whatever it is, so that you are specifically pulling out line items in that strategy around people, so that and also involving people in the process, involving people in, if you're doing partner selection, inviting, a good chunk of the organization to the demos, not to the full partner selection, but to the demos, so they're engaged in it. So the people and change is really important. Put people in as a line item in your strategy, and also identify where you think you've got challenges around people. It's not about naming people, but identify and put that in. How are we going to deal with it? Also, it can be useful to do things like surveys. How, what do people feel? One of the clients I'm working with at the minute, because they're doing a CRM and a website project, and they're a very large membership body, and there is a lot of challenges internally around skills and things like that. So actually what they've done is, and bad historical experiences around IT projects. So a survey's gone out to all staff to ask about how, what do they feel their skills levels are? What is their view around what their IT support is within the organization? What do they feel would benefit them in part of this change project? So it is about communicating with people. It is about asking questions. But one fundamental thing is, if you ask the questions and if you do something like a survey, you can't just ignore it. You need to feedback on, okay, thank you for that. And based on that, we're going to do X, Y, Z, or we're not going to do because of X, Y, Z. So engaging the people, but do it correctly. Don't have to do it.
Communication important then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Skills gap, you mentioned again, skills gap. I mean, I think in today's world, we sort of are looking to see how we can improve our skills in certain places and probably get new jobs or whatever it might be, or even just help in the project. What would one have to build on in terms of skills in something in terms of projects and digital projects?
So I think there can be fundamental differences. I said one of a client I'm working with at the minute, they kind of, so in their, for example, their membership team, it was also, this will be fine. We know how we're going to do testing. They'll be able to test against the new system because they have a current CRM system and they use that. But actually, when we got into UAT, and actually what we started finding out is they don't know how to do, some of them didn't know how to do very basic levels around using Excel, or using sort of, fundamentally sort of what should be seen as easy systems, because they've been able to kind of hide for years, without sounding crude, because they knew how to do I tick this box in this thing and I do that. So it never really flagged up, and so it sort of brought out some challenges. So very much it's about kind of looking at because nobody wants to do kind of a tell us what you think about so and so in your team. Are they any good or not? That's not how it works. That doesn't help anybody. But it's very much about sort of looking at what are the fundamental skills that we need from an IT point of view. So looking at the different roles What are their skills around, using Office? What are their skills around using things like Teams? What are their skills around using, what are the other tools and things that you need? And kind of going through and doing activities with them to find out, but very much positioning it around, but we are going to train you if something comes up, because if it's done as we're kind of doing a bit of a skills audit, people automatically think they're going to try and get rid of me. So it's again, it's that proper communication around why you're trying to do it, but also looking at, really it comes in, this is where HR definitely, get involved, not as in get HR involved and scare people, but being very clear, even just looking at, again, at in people's job descriptions, what are the skills that were needed, and actually, do people have that, or actually in their job descriptions, is there anything about the skills that they need? Is there anything about what their digital capabilities should be? And particularly for people that might have been in a role for a very, very long time, so that you can then put it in as part of training and development for their, their annual reviews and things like that. So it's lots of different ways of thinking about it, but it is really important, because these projects do throw up things that you'd be really surprised by. I hope that answers, I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you. Got a question from Daniel here. He says, lots of organizations feel they don't have the internal expertise to do discovery activities, and so they bring in a tech partner to do that. What's your thinking about this kind of situation?
Yeah, so again, I suppose it comes back to my point about the difference between discovery and requirements gathering. So requirements gathering, which I think is something that you should be doing yourself, but you can absolutely bring in expertise, because being quite honest, it's at the minute that's all I do, but it's very often they don't have the skills in-house to do that, and so there's absolutely nothing wrong. Bring in some experts that do it all the time, that they can come in and they can probably do it a lot quicker than you. From the discovery phase, it is absolutely the partner's job. That's why you're bringing them in, to go through the discovery phase, to bring out all the nuances, because they're using discovery to write your final specification of what they're going to deliver to you. So they will absolutely run discovery. You do not have to run discovery. You have to be involved in it, obviously, because you have to answer all the questions. They will run that, but they will not do requirements gathering for you. That is your responsibility and should be done way before you ever get to discovery. And yeah, some organizations just don't have the skills in-house to do it, and that's quite common. Because you guys have your day job to do, there's lots of different places where you can get assistance with that. So, bring help in where you feel that you don't have the skills to do it, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Master says, how do you try to select the best CRM solution from the requirements gathered?
Good question. So there is a lot of different systems out there. So I think, the one thing I would always say to people is, don't just start with Google, because that's what a lot of people do, and it can then throw up so many different systems and you're like going, oh, I don't know where to start. So some of the key things to think about is, think about the sector that you're working in and look for CRM providers that work in that sector, that they've got referenceability in that sector, that they've worked with similar clients to you. So not just similar clients as in that sector, but similar size, similar number of staff, similar type of revenue, similar types of activities. So that's the first place to start, because that's going to take out a huge chunk of the market. Then it would next be to look at your budget. So what type of budget are you looking for? So there's lots and lots of different systems out there. You've got a lot of the proprietary systems, like Civi CRM and Umi and things like that. And then you've got more of the platform systems, the Dynamics and the Salesforces. And then there's lots of other, different ones in between. So the platform side is going to be more on the expensive side, because they're platforms, like Salesforce and Dynamics. But there is an awful lot of other options, smaller systems, smaller cost, things like Beacon, different, there's lots of different ones. So the next bit is, it's about understanding your budget. So the first bit, they specialize in your area, they've got referenceability in your area. Then looking at budget, because that's going to tell you kind of where the type of level of partners that you should be looking at. And then read, and I suppose the other thing I would definitely say is speak to your peers in the sector that you're in. In the NFP sector, everybody's great and everybody talks to each other, and which is as it should be. Talk to your peers in other organizations, ask them what they're using, ask them what their experience is. That's another really good way to start. And then obviously, there is consultancies and things that I do where you can go out, and there's organizations who will do this for you and will, do your requirements gathering, will make you a long list of potential partners. But if you're doing it yourself, there, I suppose the key 3 things I would think about.
Great, thank you. Dinesh has a question here. Do you have a particular process to evaluate the project scope and cost? What clients say they want and what they are willing to pay are often far too off. But it takes more time to understand their process to really evaluate the configuration, time and cost.
Yeah, cost is a big part of my job, is unfortunately, and I know you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times, is being that critical friend to sometimes manage people's expectations of what they think they need to spend versus what they need to spend. And it does come from from experience of just kind of doing it all the time, but looking at what other similar organizations in the sector are doing, what are they spending, going through that requirements gathering. The requirements, I know I keep saying it, but the requirements gathering is really, really important, because it is the fundamental bedrock of how you're going to decide what it is, how much money you need to spend. Because if you were talking about a CRM system, these days, CRMs can pretty much do everything that you need to do. It's about identifying where you as a client are different, or where you're a bit weird, where you do something that's really complicated that nobody else really does. Because if you've got something where you're a bit weirder, you're a bit stranger, you're a bit more complicated, that's going to cost more money, because you're getting into more customization. So I would say it's understanding fundamentally what is it you do as an organization, how you're the same to another, say for example, membership body, but what are the nuances? And the more nuances you have, the more it's going to cost.
Thank you. Got another question here, Joyce. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this, just scrolling up.
No problem.
Are there any online resources for requirement templates that you mentioned?
There's lots and lots of different ones out there. I think that really there's lots of different ones. There's lots of different ones out there. We have our at our Square, we have our own sort of internal one that we use. But I think it's more by identifying, starting with what are the key parts of our business? What are the things that we do for a living as part of those parts of the business? What is our strategy? What is it that we're trying to do? And basically blocking, bringing all of that together. So there are some different ones in the market. I'll see if there's any that I can share. But there's lots of different ways of going about it.
Great. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you. It's just come on time. Thanks, Joyce, for that, and to everyone as well. We will get these slides on our website. I put the link to our website, so please go on to sort of past events, and the recording will also be available through that. There'll be a link to YouTube where you can listen to this talk again. Thank you very much, Joyce, again. It was a very successful, very interesting talk, and thank you to everyone as well. I'm now going to end this session.
Can I just ask a quick question before we go, if it's possible?
Yeah.
Joyce, I just wanted to double check. Do you know when you're doing the requirements gathering and the scoping exercise, is it also wise to sort of get the information that you're requiring for the actual tests in at that stage, so that the actual partner knows what you're looking for? You're also defining the tests at that point, so that when you're coming towards the end and you're doing your UAT testing, you've actually got them predefined, so you don't get any confusion in, rather than doing that towards the end.
I would say you don't need to write the scripts at that stage, but it is definitely, you're absolutely right, being very clear on what it is that you're trying to do and what it is that you're going to need to test, and that's so that the client, so the partner is clear that what they need to build for you. So that's, yeah, absolutely, having those discussions at the requirement stage about, this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is the type of thing we would be testing. So not writing the scripts at that stage, but being very clear what you're going to test absolutely will definitely help.
Thank you. Again, just something to inform. Sure you'd have seen in the slides Joyce's contact details, and I'm sure she'll be happy to get any sort of questions you have, or even meet up with them.
Yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.